Smoke signals from around the campfire.
Thank you for indulging me for, for a few minutes. That's I still haven't edited it up yet, but it's just meant to be a clip of a few minutes of the launch of our Kiklos Arts Evening, Arts, Culture and Life Evening.
They were very good.
I was stuck behind the performers. It was so packed. We had people sitting in the corridor waiting who couldn't get in, listening to it. So that was good. Yeah. So hello, everyone. Welcome to a couple of new faces. Hi, Andrew Ford. Good to see you here. What we usually do is a check-in where we just go around the circle and you can say in a couple of minutes maximum, if possible. What's coming up for you? How are you feeling? Just generally what's coming up. And then we'll move into our chosen topic, which is on the media and chosen media, trusted media. But we may end up talking about something else. We sometimes do. So we'll see how it all pans out. I've got to get a plane from Paros to Athens in a couple of hours. So I'm hoping I can complete this session, which is usually an hour and a half. We'll just go around and do the check-in. If we could do that uninterrupted, and then after that, we'll open the discussion. If you could put a digital hand up if you want to say something. That would be great. Who would like to go first? I think I know his, hand up, quick off the mark as ever. It's Ken Roseman from Silver Springs, Maryland.
Yeah, and if you don't know where that is, I'm at the southern end of downtown Silver Spring. We are right on the border with Washington, D.C. It's very multicultural, multi-ethnic. When I go into the grocery store, it's like going to the United Nations. I probably have to go to New York or San Francisco to experience that and other places in this country. Anyway, yesterday I had an amazing experience. Next door to my building is one that isn't very occupied, but so I was taking my recycling out, and instead of just coming back in the building, the weather was not bad for this time of year. So I went down to the main road in front of our building, and I heard gospel music coming out of the building next to us. And so I go up to the building, stand there for a little while, and I see people going in and out. And I noticed that there was a stairwell I could sit on. So I went in and sat on the stairwell and listened to it. Kind of sounded like the Staple Singers or the Blind Boys of Alabama, the Voices of East Harlem, whatever you want to call it, that kind of thing. And I am Jewish. I am not particularly religious or observant or anything like that. Had to put that in there because it is part of the story. And anyway, so I'm sitting on a stairwell. I think some of the people noticed I was there. Somebody comes out and asks if I would like to come into the room where the event was actually happening. I did. I was the only white person there. Sometimes I have read that maybe Jewish people are partly POC. I don't know. We can debate that. There was several vocalists, male and female, 2 teenage kids on trap set and keyboards, a guy who was probably their father on electric bass. There was great male-female vocal harmony. The lead singers, I guess that's MCs, hosts, whatever, they were really good doing their solo stuff. I felt like I had been allowed in to see something that most people who look like me would never, ever have seen, except maybe on a concert stage somewhere. There was, 5 or 6 people, 7, performing, if that's the right word, and 10 or 12 in the audience, if that's the right word. Congregation might be a better word. It's a small congregation, mostly African immigrants. So I I never experienced anything like that before. Yes, they asked me if I would accept Jesus, and I had to be very controlled about that one and say, no, I'm not religious. Please don't push that. I really like the music. She did, I don't know what this is called, lay her hands on me. I don't know if I've seen that. I never saw, I've never been to anything like that before. Anyway, it was an amazing experience. I am not quite sure if I've assimilated it yet. And the reason I asked Pete about cross-posting from that other site to Campfire is because I wrote a fairly long piece there. I do not want to have to rewrite the whole thing. And I wonder if it is possible to repost, cross-post, again, I don't know the right word, from that site to Campfire. I guess we can discuss that later.
Thanks. Sounds like
Yeah,
you had quite a moving experience. Yeah.
it was.
I'll come back to that and also to cross-posting. So anything else you want to say, or do you want to nominate?
Yeah, I'll make it really quick. Too much political email. I have to learn how to delete it because it is too stressful to read all of it. I used to take pride in being an informed person. Now all it does is give me stress, pain, and misery. Barnes & Noble over here was having a big sale, 30% off on CDs. Wait till I tell you what I got. All over the world, all kinds of stuff. Everything from Dolly Parton to a rough guide sampler on Afghanistan. So,
sorry to interrupt your shopping, but we've got to get around everyone. To your 2 minutes has come about 4, I think. So,
all right.
Would you like to pass on to somebody else?
Oh God, who else is here? I got to read your names for those that I don't. All right, Ebby, you go now.
Can you unmute?
Unmute.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So checking in. I never usually have much to say. Well, I'm here in London. It's dark and grey and damp as usual, but a lovely start to the Sunday. I'm feeling a bit calm. I don't really like Christmas, so it's a bit of a stressful time for me in terms of my emotions, but otherwise it's fine. I haven't been to the shops, which is great, so that makes the stress less, so I don't have to get the pushing and the shoving. But yeah, everything's fine. Looking forward to today's meeting to talk about media, and looking forward to know all of you much better. So just fine and calm. Thank you. And I'll pass on to Maria.
Hi, thank you for having me. I live on the island and met Pete here and heard about your group, and I'm really interested because I think, connecting with people is more important than ever. And the thing I guess that I can share that's on my mind is how important it is to tell each other the truth about what's going on with us, and how important it is to know what's going on with you. I know that sounds very simple, but I don't know how else to put that. Just, I guess when you have to, going to the topic of today about, what media sources are trusted, I found that when you have to go and ask so many people what's right, like it's a really big sign that shows you're not knowing, like what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? So it's a big sign to return to yourself, and it's a hard thing to do. So that's what's on my mind today.
Thank you, Maria. Would you like to nominate somebody else to go next?
Yeah. How about Diane?
Hi, lovely to see you all on a Sunday morning here in the UK. Yes, Abby, I've got similar grey skies and quite dull. But I'm on the coast. At least I've got the beach is not far away if I want it. Yeah, what's been coming up for me the last couple of months, I've been coming out of what I've termed a depressive slump. It took me a while to realize that's where I'd been for a couple of years, but I know that's really common with many people, because a lot of people I talk to resonate with that. So yeah, it's been an interesting thing. This is my quiet time of year. I always know, normally, whatever normal is, I would find this the toughest time, from the time we change our clocks at the end of October until solstice. But this year it's been okay, and I think it's because I'm being very kind to myself, which is helpful. But I've also organised that I'm running a workshop in Glastonbury on the 21st, so that's something nice to look forward to, and I've got a few people booked on that, which is lovely. Yeah, what's been coming up around stuff? Yeah, this whole cashless society thing, which I have a real problem with. That's just awful. And one of the things, having got so used over the C-crap time, using cards, because that's all anybody would accept, it's kind of getting back into using cash. I'm finding I'm having to be really conscious about remembering to get cash out, so I can use cash all the time. Yeah, other than that, yeah, no, that's cool. That's enough for me now. Thank you. I will pass over to Brian.
Well, can everybody hear me? Is the mic working okay? Yeah, things are going pretty good at the moment. I'm earning beyond my lifestyle rather than living beyond my means. So I'm in a nice, a reasonable gig, just a little taking me up to the Christmas break. I'll be heading back to Northern Ireland for a couple of weeks of right. So what's on my mind at the moment is it's coming up. I mean, it's the solstice, the winter solstice. That's the longest night. The time for celebration as the sort of the darkest days are over. That's on the 21st. But it's actually 3 points on the calendar. There's the earliest sunset and the latest sunrise. The earliest sunset happens about the 13th. And basically because my body clock tends to work in the evenings. That's what I want to see if I can do is just have a beacon for the to celebrate the 13th. The darkest evenings are over, and then maybe something else for the solstice. But generally things are going pretty well. Just at the moment. Yeah, it's just if I pass on to eBay, eBay. So how do you pronounce it? eBay or eBay?
He's already gone. Actually, it's
yeah. Yeah. Okay. What about Zelda? Have you gone?
No, I haven't.
Good to see you here, Zelda.
Hello. Yeah, sorry I'm a bit late, but I had to do a lot of fiddling about before I could actually get on here. Yeah, Brian. Yeah, I'm from Northern Ireland too. I live in Amsterdam, so that's where I'm speaking from today. And the topic you gave, Pete, for today, I thought that is, I was just have been reading an article, a piece by Matt Taibbi. Maybe you posted it actually, I can't remember, about a debate that he was having that no media to be trusted these days. And yeah, that's a sad reflection of the way things are. I think that's true. I feel, I was just saying to a friend of mine yesterday who's a journalist, I feel I have to check 10 different sources coming from different angles. And even then I won't really get to the whatever their truth there might be in it, if there is such a thing as truth at this stage. So around that, that topic sparked me to think more about that. but as for what our trusted media, for me now, and as Matt Taibbi said in this particular piece that he wrote, it was, he said it used to be that The Guardian and the BBC were fairly, or at least I probably was part of that, and still am to some extent. They had the idea that they were relatively impartial, but that's just definitely not true with the whole pandemic thing. So again, it's back to looking, it's exhausting trying to get a perspective on it. When I have my own prejudices and judgments as well. So it's good to talk, just connect with other people who are trying to do the same thing, and maybe get even more and different perspectives on it. What else I want to say about that? And just here in the Netherlands, they were pretty kind of totalitarian in some respects in terms of lockdowns and having to use QR codes to get into places. And now that there is this move to, they're saying, well, this was such a success, we might use this for other things too. And I think this is just disastrous. Yeah, I'm seeing that. Yeah, it's the most refined propaganda. Indeed, I read that this morning in what you wrote, Pete. That's just true. So yeah, what was I saying about? Yeah, here it was really extraordinary and very polarized. And now it's this thing that nobody's talking about that. I mean, we're not going to talk about how that all happened and how people treated each other, which is scary, because I think if we don't really address it, it's going to be around. It's going to come up again anytime soon. Anyway, that's a blather on for another hour, probably. I'll leave it at that for now. Great to see you, Pete.
Good to see you, Zelda. Do you want to nominate somebody else who hasn't gone? Andrew, Chris, and myself, I think, are the ones who haven't gone.
Sorry?
Would you like to nominate either Andrew, Chris, or myself? I think we're the ones who haven't been yet.
I'll nominate you then, Pete.
Okay.
I'm doing this on my phone, so yeah. Okay, you.
Yeah, thank you. There's lots I'd like to come back to in what you said, and was it Matt Taibbi who did the posting about the Biden thing on Twitter? I think it was. Yeah.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
He did a whole series of tweets in a row about the story there, and he's had thousands of retweets. Unbelievable stuff. I haven't had time to post it yet. I'd like to post it on Campfire because it does expose how corrupt Twitter was. I don't know what's going to change under the Elon Musk Twitter empire, but we'll see. I'm sure people will have stuff to talk about on that. In terms of how I'm feeling, I'm sort of in transition mode, really. I've been in Paros for 3 months. I've been loving the change of the seasons. We've had some absolute torrential rain. I've had my studio at the back of the house flooded 3 times. I've had to mop up the water, but I've loved, the view out here now. It's a glorious early winter's day, clear blue sky. I'm really going to miss it. So I'm psyching myself up for heading back into the darkness, I guess. And I do quite enjoy that. I was almost craving it during the lockdown here 2 years ago, because even in around solstice time, it doesn't get properly dark until after 5 o'clock. And I was almost missing that sort of enveloped darkness that you get in England at 4 p.m., when the candles get lit, and it's sort of cozy, but I try to find ways of celebrating the light we create around the darkness at that time of year, which is probably the reason I did my winter solstice mixes, which you may have seen on the site. I'll put the link in, actually, for anyone who hasn't yet seen them. But the Deep and Crisp and Even one is a real favourite of mine, which is 22 years old now, which I played out live at the Union Chapel. Supporting Tom Middleton, and that was it's probably had thousands of views on different sites over the years, and I still get letters and notes from people saying, we play it during our Christmas dinner every year, or we play it on solstice, or it seems to mark an occasion. So I put some visuals to it 2 years ago. They're very amateurish DIY style, which is usually the way I do my art. But you might want to have a look at the Deep and Crisp and Even mix. And there are a couple of other mixes there, if you like that one as well. So, yeah, I'm just getting ready for the transition back to the UK. Looking forward to the Winter Gathering in mid-January. Looking forward to a couple of Beacon meetings in December. We've got the London one on the Sunday, is it the 18th, 17th, whatever that Sunday is, before Christmas. And then Brighton, Claire Johnson, who's been very active on the site recently, has offered to host a Brighton Beacon meeting on the 29th, Thursday. So feels really good after 2 years of not really doing any meetings to get back in with Camp Out this summer and now the Beacon meetings. So I've taken up way beyond my 2 minutes already. More chat later. Pass you on to Andrew.
Hello, folks. This is my first Sunday meeting. I think I discovered Campfire at Camp Out, like Peter mentioned, back in July, was it? It seems forever ago. Lots has happened since then. So just a little bit of background in my story as to why I'm here. I'm an escapee from Australia. I had to apply for an exemption to leave my own country back in June this year. And so thankfully I have a second passport. So I'm in the UK at the moment, and just spending some time here to just reassess everything after the last 2 years of authoritarian tyranny. So yeah, really appreciating, I think, where am I at the moment? Like, it's a great opening question, Pete. How am I feeling? What's going on for me? Grateful to be a part of a group like this, just kind of floating around the edges of the campfire stuff, and loving it, because it's just good to be engaged with people who think, people who critically think and ask questions and don't just accept the narrative or just those surface things. And I really appreciate you delving in. What's really going on here? What that doesn't feel right? What's going on? So I really appreciate, and then the openness and the non-judgment and the just exploring ideas, and I love that. And I'm all about freedom. I'm all about all those things, all those inalienable rights that seem to be chipped away constantly in our society. And I guess what's going on for me right now, just really interested, because I'm really looking for sort of guidance as to what the next step is for me. And my wife, we're both over here at the moment, just with the kindness of a friend who's letting us stay in his house for as long as we want for free, which is amazing. So it just gives us that time to explore and have some space. And I just, an interesting thing that just came up for me the other day was I was at Ales and Carols, an event run by a church in a pub where we sampled ales and we sang carols in a raucous fashion. And I met a guy there who said, I believe I've got something to say to you from God. And he started saying these things, and I was like, and my background is Christian. I would say my tradition is Christian, but yes, I'm a Christ follower, I would say I am, but I'm very open to the truth wherever I find it. And he started saying these things, and it was quite amazing. So I've arranged to meet up with him later this week to just explore that a little further, because it was a bit noisy and there was too much beer going on to be spiritual at the time. So that's what's going on for me at the moment, just exploring the future and seeing where I go, and loving the campfire experience. So whoever's left can take over from me now. Was it Zelda? No, it wasn't. Who's left?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, here's yeah, so yeah. It's gloomy down in Falmouth. Temperatures in single figures, which is unusual for this neck of the woods. And yeah, so it's feels like winter, and yeah, so I've been out and about during the week. I like walking around, having conversations with real people, not what we're going to be discussing, which, you're asking questions. Are people still connected to the cathode ray nipple or digital nipple as it is these days? And, this has been going on for 30, 40 years, and people still haven't woken up to it. It's taken a lockdown to bring about a stirring of, emotions and other things. And now we're left with processing it. It's going to be a hard thing to process because it's complex. And, I think, it's quite a big subject that we're approaching here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think we'll be, it feels like we'll be scratching the surface. It is indeed a huge topic. And the way that the narrative has been running is, for me, is sort of occupying that central space of what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years in particular. Would anybody like to pick up on any of the points they've heard and lead into a more general discussion on the media and what media you consume and how you react to it? And Abby's already got her hand up. Could you also do it digitally if possible, in case I miss the visual signals? But yeah, take it away.
I like what Maria said. So I just want to pick up from where she started about the media. It is very difficult now to know what's right and what's not right. And I think the important thing, like Maria pointed out, is about discernment. So knowing who we are and really able to discern what's true and what's not true, because it is really very, very difficult now, because anything you're reading, and I think it's also good to be wide, because if you're reading from one source, then you tend to be in an echo chamber, and it's like having a mechanic and you just stick to the one mechanic without exploring others, so you don't know when they're cheating you. And I think it's the same thing that is happening now. Unfortunately, like I think somebody pointed out, I think that was that Michael? Christopher. And he said it's been going on for decades, and we haven't realized that there's been heavy censorship in the media for decades. This is not new. And I suppose the last 2 years, a lot of us have woken up. I mean, I've always known, even from childhood, that there's been something wrong. I just didn't realize the extent of it. And now looking at the media, I mean, somebody asked me yesterday, said, this media is great. And I said, I don't really think so. And he said, it's not owned by anybody. I said, well, you think it's not owned by anybody, but it's if you follow the pattern. Somebody posted recently on Campfire about Monopoly, which I've seen about 2 years ago. And that's now, I think, banned on YouTube. You can't see it on YouTube. And it shows you the links and the connections to all this media, like all the global mainstream media coming from one source, really. And that's why we get the same information, and it's not balanced. So I think what Maria said, I resonate a lot with that, where we have to know who we are. We have to come from the inside and be able to know what's true and what's not true. I think that's important. And I think it's open, like I think you realize I posted something and I didn't put the narrative once. And I think that brought a lot of conversation, which I felt negative. But my take on it was just research yourself. If I put anything, I think if anybody puts anything there, we all have to research and find what the truth is, because we can't take anything at face value. Because I'm posting something, I don't really know, because I could check sources, but it doesn't mean those sources are accurate either. There might be sources that we respected 10 years ago, but most sources that we respected 10, 20 years ago today are not reliable. They follow, a lot of them, the narrative, which is not, well, I think most of us know the narrative is a lie. So that's what I want to say.
Yeah. I think you brought up the word censorship, and this happens in many forms, sometimes quite subtle and discreet. And I know Facebook's fact-checking, for instance, if you scratch beneath the surface and look at who's doing their fact-checking, and fact-checking in general is always part of vested interests. And you might be surprised or not to see who's involved in the fact-checking companies as well. And yeah, moderation as well generally is, I know quite a few people who've been suspended from Facebook, let's put it that way, and YouTube in particular. You know, you only have to look at Dr. John Campbell's videos. For me, one of the few people who's being open and studying the figures on vaccines, for instance. And he has to watch every word, and you know, he's now become a parody of himself, and the way he phrases everything quite deliberately. He's unable to say anything, but he lets other people say it when it's in the official channels, like Tory politicians, infamously, who are now talking about it, and he allows them on his channel, broadcasting from the Houses of Parliament. You know, so it just feels completely out of sync and out of kilter to me. It's where's the truth coming from? Yeah, trust our gut instincts would be my answer on that. Ken, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, okay. I don't think this will be conclusive at all. Trying to figure out what media sources actually are best. I will admit that I do not read conservative and Republican stuff because it will just give me a headache. There was a very harrowing episode, I don't know what to call that, of Democracy Now! And I put a link to that program on the Campfire website. So it's not here, it's when I posted earlier. A couple of days ago, Democracy Now! It's a program hosted by Amy Goodman out of New York. And they had a story about the Palestinian American journalist who was killed, Shireen Al-Akba. I'm not sure I pronounced it right. And that was really harrowing. I suspect I would not see that even on public broadcasting over here. That was, I mean, they showed an excerpt from the documentary about Shireen, and it was the exact time that she was killed. Is, you know, it was because she was down. She was down. I could tell it was her. I've never seen anything like that before. I am Jewish, but I do not support the present Israeli government. I think the next one's going to be even worse. I do not think the Israeli government has been telling us the truth about this thing. And, you know, dealing with the Middle East issue is just harrowing in general, because if I deviate from the mainstream, I'll be called a self-hating Jew or a Jewish anti-Semite or some other BS like that. It's tough. So anyway, the main things I look at these days are Guardian, reader-supported news, which is an alternative aggregator in this country, Democracy Now!, and Russell Brand. So, you know, and also I have discovered that I do have to watch how I express myself on that other site. I was almost suspended once.
Blimey.
And I call myself, I don't refer to our previous glorious leader over here by his name. I call him 45 or DJT or the funny blonde-haired one or something else. I don't take chances.
I don't think you'd be suspended for Johnson bashing, really, would you? But maybe too many Steel Eye Span mentions.
No, it was for something where I referred to the working class or something like that, and the AI didn't care for that. So I just figured I better be careful. And if I'm going to talk about the former leader of my beloved country, I do not refer to him by name, because I am aware that other people have been censored on the Mark Zuckerberg empire and been banned, or I don't know what the correct phrases are. And I'm in touch with too many people around the world to want to lose that. You know, as rotten as he may be and capitalist, all the rest of it, I have connections in 20 to 30 different countries, and I don't want to lose that. Mostly in the international music community.
Thanks, Ken. Dan.
Yeah, okay. Media, what do I trust? Nothing. That's been true for years. I mean, because everybody has their own agenda. We all do. Every one of us sat here, we've got our own agenda. So that's an inevitability. So what do I do? Yeah, I do what you were suggesting there. I listen and talk to people. I deliberately read sometimes some of the more so-called right-wing media. Most of it's right-wing anyway in this country. Just to understand what people are talking about. But I come from what I call a mixed family. My mum's a soft Tory, and my dad's a theist, and my dad is an atheist, brought up Catholic. Mum was brought up Church of England, and dad's very strongly socialist and comes from a strong working class socialist background, including having had an uncle who was in the heavily involved in trade unions and stuff in the docks, and others who were involved in other transportation and all sorts of things. So yeah, I have quite a cynical view when it comes to all this stuff, and I just hold my own beliefs because that's all it can be, and it's coloured by my own knowledge of who I am inside and what I'm about, and that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, the phrase confirmation bias is popping up for me at the moment. So many people will, and we saw this a year ago when Campfire's Facebook group was, people were at loggerheads over, guess what? Segregation, lockdown, blah, blah, blah. So many people were just stripping in links that they found that just supported their view, often without even reading them, I found. And I think it's really important to actually go a bit deeper and actually check through the sources you're looking at. And how does it make you feel when you read it? You know, I mean, when I read, it's interesting that Ken mentions The Guardian, because 10 years ago, I probably trusted The Guardian, but when you realize Bill Gates has got major shares in The Guardian, the Gates Foundation logo is actually over some of their pages, you realize what the true agenda is there. And, you know, I didn't even mention the whole business around Israel and Palestine and their view on that, or around Corbyn and what happened there and the vilification that went on with Jeremy Corbyn from what was considered a left-wing paper. And as it's worth listening to the John Pilger interview on the podcast that Sean posted, I think, because Sean gets a question in there at the end, which is good. But Pilger basically says everyone is right-wing, you know, the main press are right-wing, the Labour Party is right-wing. So we have to look for proper alternatives beyond the mainstream. There's a lot more I could say on this, but Andrew, you got your hand up.
Yeah. So just sort of thoughts, random thoughts. So Diane, yeah, totally go along with what you're saying there of the bias, and I think an awareness of our own bias and the biases of whatever media we are consuming or avoiding makes sense to me. And I guess to add to that as well, now let me just press something. So Zelda, you mentioned about like I get tired, like so many sources I have to look at, and I would love, and I don't think we'll ever get it, a media that actually says, here's one side, here's another side, here's 2 or 3 perspectives, and you make your own mind up. And it's like, it just doesn't exist anymore, even if it did. And I stopped watching mainstream media many years ago, and they only re-engage with it like over the last couple of years. They go, I can't stand this. This is so, I was amazed at how one-sided a single narrative, not, you know, there was no journalism, as in no holding to account of authorities, no asking difficult questions or seeing gaps or giving an alternative. So I find for myself that I go looking. It's like I try and remain open. I'm appreciating I have a bias, of course, and I'm looking to confirm that. So I'll try and override that if possible. But then it's like, oh, I've got a question. Can I get that question answered? So, I mean, something that comes to mind, it's like, there's a virus out there and it's deadly. Okay, how deadly? To who? To what extent? For how long? It's like, these questions are not answered. We've got this many cases. okay, what's a case? Is a case a positive test? Is it someone who's got a cough? Is it someone that's gone to the doctor? Is it someone in ICU? Is it someone that's died? What is a case? It's like, but I think I find myself so frustrated with those around me or those I come in contact with, and maybe not in places like this, but it's like, aren't you asking any questions? Where are the questions here? It's like, there's so many unanswered questions. Like a friend of mine said, oh yeah, Chris Whitty was such an authority throughout the, it's like, I had 500 questions to ask this man. He just came and gave a very, very narrow, be scared, we might all die, and then walked away. It's like, hang on a minute. Where are the journalists asking this man some questions? It's like, these people are put in a position, these people are supposed to serve us, and they're put in this position, and actually it feels like media and those kind of, that kind of bureaucrat and politician class are kind of like seeking to manipulate, not to set you free with information, but instead to manipulate you with a very, very narrow. So I don't know if I said anything in there, but anyway, I just looking at many sources to then eventually make my own mind up. And I agree with you, Diane, that it's like, I've probably come to a conclusion, the truth, like the science, how are we ever going to arrive at it? I don't know. But I think remaining open, like questioning till you get to a certain point and going, well, I feel like I've got a conclusion there, but be open. Just like, well, it's like the scientific method, isn't it? The scientific method, that's why I love, I've listened to Dolores Cahill, and she has, I think it's 10% of her budget is put into questioning her own scientific conclusions. And so think, well, that just makes sense. The scientific method says, I want you to prove me wrong, because I would appreciate that. If you try and prove me wrong and you are wrong, I've been proven right. If you prove me wrong, I say thank you, because you've helped me see more clearly. And that's what I would want for my media to be. And that's what I want when I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the world and my place in it and how I navigate my way through it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me rant.
It's good. We all need to rant on this. And was it Fauci who really followed the science quote that became so popular? I think he was one of the main guilty partners for that. But it was almost,
if you question me, you're questioning the science. That's what he said.
It's like closing down the argument, really. Follow the science. Yeah. Diane.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that have popped up there. So I just wrote down a few notes. Just your last comment there. So science, the definition at the Science Museum is science knowledge as it is at present known, because, and I think that's lovely. And I heard that one years ago and I thought, yeah, that's perfect, because we don't know. And science is about understanding and is about, questioning and all of that. So that's great. With regard to critical thinking, because that's actually discouraged these days at university level, which is more than disgusting. It's just shows where the establishment is around their thinking and also their fear. I think it's a reflection of. But I think some of the best journalists actually are often local journalists, if you get a chance. I mean, things like, I think what a good example of that was when somebody strung together a whole bunch of radio interviews with Liz Truss. So it's local radio interviewing Liz Truss. I don't know if anybody else heard that. Yeah, not Pete nodding. It was amazing because all she could do is bluster, bluster, I'm saying the party line, bluster, bluster. And that was to everything. And it was marvelous because everybody, there were these people tried to ask intelligent questions, doing proper journalism, what I call proper journalism anyway. And she just didn't have a clue. She didn't know how to answer it. She was rubbish and just showed how people are just puppets who are fed lines. We go back to Reagan and how he was fed lines. Well, he was an actor. He could do that. He was very good at it. But the trouble is that so many politicians are that way these days anyway. And I think there's a lack of experience amongst politicians. That's a whole other story for another day, isn't it? So media. Yeah, anyway, I think that's my bit there. I'll just stop. Sorry, other people need.
Yeah, I wanted to, thanks, it all makes sense. I wanted to also go back to a comment Maria's put in the chat about hosting two people with opposing views, to pick up on that point that was mentioned and that Andrew mentioned. And Yeah, I think one of the things I'd love to develop more with Campfire is creating forums where we can invite on guests with opposing views, and it may be something AB may want to talk about because it relates to what a discussion we had about natural law. And we brought in a lawyer who's a friend of mine who worked for Extinction Rebellion and various others. And he had a very different view to your friend Chad, who you introduced me to on a separate private call. But to get two very different views on natural law, you know, one from someone who perhaps is trashing it as a knee-jerk reaction, which seemed to be what my lawyer friend Paul was doing, and someone else who's passionate about it. The sparks can really fly, but in a creative way, if we can all learn to deeply listen to the other person and not just respond with a knee-jerk reaction that's defending your own position, that's where it gets really interesting for me, just opening up the debate fully.
I think if we can avoid, I think once it gets to ad hominem attacks, you know, when it starts the whole kind of character assassination, you've lost the thing. But as soon as arguments can be robust against each other, I think that's when you iron sharpens iron, and you certainly find a new perspective.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
The other point I was going to make is often people who I've just dismissed as I won't listen to that person or anything they've got to say, I can be very wrong. You know, I heard Peak Prosperity, Chris Martinson, someone I quite trust, certainly did all the way through the first 2 years of the so-called pandemic. And he interviewed David Icke, who's a person I wouldn't normally go near, I wouldn't touch with a barge pole. He was a police guy. And I ended up not quite punching the air, but nodding in agreement to a lot of what David Icke was saying on that particular interview. Which I learned something from my reaction, my visceral reaction to that. Maybe.
So what I'm finding out is that all this happening, especially in the last 2 years, is actually a lot for us and in our growth. And I think, like you said, Pete, earlier, I think it's very important that we keep an open mind, because sometimes people with an opposing view might have one point that might resonate with us. So it's always good. And it is difficult because when you the lies are kind of like obvious and they're like supporting these lies, but they might, at the end of it, have one thing in there that might resonate with us. So I think a lot of it is for our learning as individuals to keep that open mind always. I went to listen to Dr. Malhotra recently, and there were a lot of people in the audience who were like saying, oh, what, 2 years ago you were supporting this, you were on ITV supporting the injections. And he's saying, look, I've learned, the facts are now out there, you know, but they refuse to change their standpoint. They thought, oh, you're a shill, you're a traitor. And they were practically almost throwing, if they had tomatoes, they probably would have thrown that at him. But, and I felt, from my standpoint, I felt that this is somebody who's a cardiologist, very well respected in the medical community. And he's basically saying, I believe this 3 years ago, this has happened to my family. The facts are now out there. And I think that takes great courage to actually speak out, and to speak out against pharma, because that is risk-taking. He could be killed. We know people have died for speaking out, you know. And I just think that we always have to have an open mind about what we hear, and not be shocked. And even if, like you said with David Icke, I didn't like David Icke either. But I've taken the time to listen to him, and he has a lot of valid points, and he has been fighting this fight for about 40 years. And a lot of the things that he has said 40 years ago are coming to pass now. You know, it's like what people said were conspiracy theories are actually happening at this point. So they're not conspiracy theories, they're actually conspiracy facts happening, and still people are denying. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, and you mentioned Asim Malhotra. He did a great interview on, what was the show? Is it Carson? I'm trying to remember his name. I posted it up a couple of days ago.
Carson. That was a great interview. It's really amazing.
Really, I'd urge everyone to watch that for Asim Malhotra. I don't know much about Tucker Carlson, but I would imagine he's one of those people, certain critics might say, oh, you don't want to listen to him because ... So guilt by association. But listen to what Asim's saying, particularly about pharma. And it really is, I learned a lot from that particular. I'll put the link in the chat in a minute. Compassionate conflict, yes. Maria posted as a way of, listening to both sides. And language is so important, isn't it? Because we take a phrase like compassionate conflict and it can become, it gives a framework almost for how we might talk to each other with opposing views. And Dan Aston Gregory, who did our keynote speech at Campout, was talking about the phrase dancing around a subject emerged. And I love that because the dancing around a subject was very much about people having opposing views and they're dancing around it in a, I mean, the whole metaphor of dance is a positive one. So, yeah. Zelda.
Yeah, I was responding when I put my hand up to the David Icke, what you said about David Icke. I don't know if you know this, well, probably none of you do, but he was supposed to come to the Netherlands about 2 weeks ago to participate in a peace demonstration. And a Jewish organization found out that he was coming and tried to get him banned. And they did it on the basis of that he was anti-Semitic. So I thought, well, wait a minute, I don't really know a lot about him. I saw him in one interview with Brian Rose on London Rail, and I ended up just leaving it halfway because I really can't stand Brian Rose. But I thought I don't know enough about him, so I thought, has he said something anti-Semitic? So I went into listened to a number of things by him, and I thought, really, this is off. So they couldn't. It didn't work. The initial attempt to ban him didn't work. So what they did is they went to the immigration services and they asked them to find a reason to ban him. And then he got banned, which means that he's effectively banned from 26 European countries now. And I just think that's appalling. And a lot of people, he's a lot more famous here now than he would have been if he'd just been speaking at the demonstration, I think. So it's peculiar how that works. But I couldn't find anything anti-Semitic. And although I think some of the things he says, I think, reptiles, but I think a lot of what he has to say is very valid. But it is a bit shocking that now there's a court case here now to try and get that undone, that ban. But it's scary when that can happen, I think.
Who is this person who is banned?
David Icke is his name.
Never heard of him.
The person I was talking about 5 minutes ago when I mentioned the interview that David Icke did with Peak Prosperity's Chris Martinson. And what I said, if you missed it, was I would have dismissed David Icke completely, 100% 10 years ago. But I actually listened because Chris Martinson made the point that not everything that everyone says is worth immediately dismissing. And he was cautious in his presentation. And I came out of the interview thinking a lot of what Icke said in that was worthwhile, and I agreed with it. So I will try and post the link for that as well, if I can find it while the conversation's going on. But the point Zelda makes, quite rightly, is by banning someone, often you're propelling them into a position where they get much more attention than they would have done anyway. And you remember when Frankie Goes to Hollywood used to be top of the British charts just because they were banned, and everyone would go out and buy the record because they wanted to hear it. Now that wouldn't happen. Chris.
Yeah, as one of the things that I do is I've done a lot of work in nonviolent communication, and I know since I've started doing it, which has been the sort of past 5 years, that it's helped me tremendously. That it means I don't get, sort of depressed because, you're up against somebody's, got a view that's so far out, but what it does, it puts me in touch with the person. And I think this is important. People need to be spoken to, not information thrown at. And I think it's, we do need communication. Be interesting that, something I'm thinking about at the moment, that you had the rock stars, sort of like in the 70s, and, they used to be the bad boys, break the rules, all this business. Then the politicians decided they want to become rock stars, except that they became useless in the process. Now it's the media that want to be the rock stars. It's all about ratings and stuff like that. And it was only 200 years ago that a ship came into Falmouth, where I'm, live at the moment, not far from where I am, bringing news of, the Battle of Trafalgar. How much water's gone over under the bridge then? How much have we collated, seen, the problems that will arise by instantaneous media? We have responsibility, because at the moment we're in an age of chaos, and if we don't come out of it, then goodbye to everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Very heartfelt. Ken.
Right. It may be that here in the United States, I'm going to react to all of this differently. I pay very little attention to the likes of Tucker Carlson. I have virtually no use for conservatives in general, basically because of their generally bad positions on environmental preservation. Very pro fossil fuels and free enterprise and all of that. So I generally don't respect them very much. And if I had to listen to it, it would give me a headache and be very stressful. I have to say that Russell Brand wrote one of the best pieces on the Middle East situation I have ever read. So I signed up for his email list. And I do think we're gonna, like so many of these topics that we get into, we're gonna have to do this again because we can barely scratch the surface of it.
Yeah, if I can pick up on something, I'm just going to post the interview with Asim Malhotra, and the point I'd like to make on this, it's not about Tucker Carlson. For me, I don't really know much about him. I know people will dismiss him, and that, I suppose, is damning by association for Asim Malhotra. But don't we have to try and get beyond? The problem for Asim Malhotra is that he won't get interviewed on much of mainstream media. So at the moment, he's having to resort to, and I don't know if he'd even see it as resorting to, but in some people's eyes, he's resorting to having to take what interviews he's getting on popular channels. So to take the Tucker Carlson interview, and 95% of that interview is about Asim Malhotra. So if you can bear to watch it and disregard what Tucker Carlson's saying, there's a lot to be learned. I'm saying this in a roundabout way, but
Pete as well. John Campbell also interviewed Asim Malhotra, which was again, if you like the style better, that's really just facts and what he's discovered about the safety and efficacy of the current COVID vaccine.
Yeah, John Campbell's well worth watching generally. AB, you have your hand up.
Yeah, addressing Ken, I think one of the things that we need to learn is to be neutral, so non-partisan, because unfortunately, this is across the board. It's not a party issue we're facing at the moment. We're facing a good and evil, and that's all over. So I think we need to come away from conservatives versus Democrats or Labour versus, because like somebody said, they're different wings of the same bird. So we need to, and that's very difficult. I found that really difficult, being neutral. And somebody said to me, does that mean you don't take any action? So I realize that I still take action against what I discern to be good, but taking away the emotions, which is a very difficult thing. So the emotions of anger, frustration, and just being neutral. And I found that has given me a lot of peace and has also helped me to stay focused and understand that we're all one. And the partisan thing divides us, because you'll say, oh, that person's conservative. I mean, I do listen to Tucker Carlson, and the reason why I listen to Tucker Carlson is because he challenges the narrative, even though Fox News, if you find out, you see that Fox News and MSNBC are actually on the same side, but they have controlled the opposition. So Fox News is the controlled opposition, which is put there to make us feel that there's a difference, even though they're on the same side. So there's the illusion that they're different, but they're not. They're fighting the same war. And the thing about listening to that interview that you said, it was really good. And it's 95% Dr. Malhotra. And he explains the personal pain that he has felt through the introduction of the injections and his research. And he's really well known. He's good on the statistics. He's good on the facts. He's written papers about it. He's been advocating against Big Pharma for more than 10 years. Which I didn't know about. So it's such a good interview, and it's very well balanced. So I would encourage you to listen. Thanks.
Thank you, Abby. And I would agree. Yeah, he talks about Bill Gates' interest in The Guardian, for instance. He talks about Big Pharma, very interesting stuff. The good versus evil thing is interesting, because I was reading this essential Charles Eisenstein latest essay from yesterday. I haven't even had time to post it on Campfire yet. One of his best, but he's seeing a similar sort of framing of, he talks about evil and fighting, and getting away from. Anyone who saw my Facebook post this morning sort of alludes to that, and I linked to the Eisenstein article there as well, but I've not had time to put it up on Campfire. I'd recommend reading Eisenstein always. Sometimes he can be a bit long-winded, but in this particular one, it's one of two parts. And I think in the second one, he'll talk about positive solutions, but he's really preparing the ground and talking about the frameworks around evil and fighting and those sort of words and that sort of terminology that goes with the mindset around that. So the link is probably a much shorter one than the one I've put in there, but that one will get you to the piece. Maria, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to share something after listening to Ken about not being able to, let me reframe this. It's about listening and knowing for yourself, when is it that you stop listening, and how important that is that we understand, because that's part of that creating a container where all opinions are welcome and we can have compassionate conflict. So just knowing for myself, I'll share, I stop listening, like judgment goes up, walls go up when I sense that I'm not being listened to, and when I feel that the person opposite me is very certain. When they're very certain, for some reason, I'm just like, well, now I don't want to, and that might be a flaw, a blind spot, something that I need to watch. But just I wanted to offer that question to the group, when do you go offline and you're listening? Because I think everybody here, based on listening to you talk and share, you are good listeners. You are good at being present with people. So just, I wanted to offer that question. And can I say one second thing?
Of course.
A second thing has to do with, maybe it's a great thing, Pete, that you're not very aware of, the things in the US and what media is what and what's left and what's right. Because you're not triggered. You're not like, oh, this goes in this box and this goes in this box. You kind of are more open-minded, just like I would be more open-minded because I have no idea of the political things in the UK and who's what, and so I just wanted to make that comment too. Thank you.
Very important comments, I think. And yeah, I used to think of myself as I suppose, a fairly radical activist on the left wing, but I've realised now the left and right have just become meaningless in so many ways, and they've blurred. And I was described as being far right in terms of my attitude to vaccination. So where do have a breakdown? Am I left? Am I right? I don't know. God, it just makes a mockery of those definitions and boxes, really. So yeah, some very important points. And one of the things Campfire likes to do at our events whenever possible is deep listening exercises or games. Those who are at Camp Out may have been part of that. The Paros gathering we did in September, we started with that, and it was enormously rewarding and fun. And I've said several times I was on a workshop weekend with Scylla Elworthy and Nicholas Yanni, where I learnt deep listening, and we played many different games, and it was life-changing, really. Zelda.
Oh yeah, now I'm off on another track. You mentioned Scylla Elworthy. I just love Scylla. She's so great. But the original reason I put up my hand was about Tucker Carlson. And what Ken said, I really get what he's saying. The tendency to, I also had a tendency, like, I don't want to listen to that man, and I don't like his hair, which is really superficial, but hey. But one of the things, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Matthias Desmet, a Belgian guy who's a professor of clinical psychology in Ghent University. And he wrote a book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And he went to the States. That book, of course, it caused a huge flurry. And he went to the States and he talked to Tucker Carlson and, deep breath, Alex Jones. And he was broadly criticized for speaking to these two people. But what he said was, I don't care who I talk to. It's important that we keep talking, just keep talking. And I loved what Maria said. I think it's so, although I'm not always very good at it myself, thinking, when do I stop listening? And that's more or less what Matthias Desmet was saying, and what is in his book is we have to keep communicating with each other, even though we think that the other person might be a monster or whatever, we have to keep communicating. So I just, when Tucker Carlson came up, and I thought, that'll be worth listening to. I like Asim Malhotra and what he's been doing anyway. And he set up an organization, by the way, probably most of you know that, but there's a public health or something or other. He has just, I think, recently set up. Yeah, so thanks for what you said, Maria. A reminder.
Thank you, Zelda. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, also echo that, Maria. That was lovely. I got tingles as you were talking. It was just, what you were sharing was very real for you, and I really connected with that. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And that's a couple of things come up for me as a part of the conversation, and I think triggered by what Maria said as well, is that whole, it's a COVID thing, but it's seek first to understand before being understood. And when we're kind of at that place of, okay, so we've listened to something from media and we think we understand something, and then often it comes to a conversation, doesn't it, then with friends or family as to what do I think about this situation, be it Israel or COVID or current political disasters in our own countries. What do we think about it? But that whole thing of just seeking to understand someone else's perspective, because yes, you're right, we often have our minds so fixed that we're not willing to listen to others. When are we stopped? And actually we might actually, if we're in an echo chamber, then we don't ever learn anything new. We just have what we think confirmed. And then I just think as well, what was the other thing I was thinking? And this is again, I'll just share my challenge. I'm not saying anybody else should do this, but just I'll offer it as being my challenge of where I've been is like, if I'm reacting, I feel angry by, let's just, a journalist, and I don't like that person. It's like, what's that reaction in me? Why am I reacting the way I am? And it's almost like taking the whole thing of what happens in interpersonal relationships. Why am I reacting the way I am to that person? Why am I reacting to that journalist? Why am I reacting to that story or that perspective in the way that I am? What does that actually say about me? Rather than, well, I disagree and I feel strongly, therefore they must be wrong. Instead, I'd stop and question the whole, well, why am I reacting that way? What is it within me that's reacting to that news and then bringing up that emotion or that, that sensation for me? So, I mean, it doesn't mean to say that I won't then, keep my mind, but at least I'm a little bit more open to having my mind changed by going, is it just a visceral reaction within me and what's that connecting with? Because, that bias is still there. So.
Thank you. And I think our own reaction and how we might change is always essential to this, isn't it? How it comes back to what we're feeling, what's our truth, how we physically reacting. Diane.
Yeah, just a quick one here. If people want a tool to help to be able to listen to someone better who you're having an adverse reaction to, and that is to find something that you like about them. And it could be their glasses. It could be the way they've got their hair done, or they've got interesting colored eyes, or anything. I mean, the guy, my old boss was the one who taught me this one. And his comment was, well, if they've got a nice tie, focus on the fact that they're wearing a nice tie, or you like the color of their shirt, because that way you're starting off with something positive, which then makes it easier for you to engage with them and then go from there. I don't do it consciously so much these days because I've got very used to sitting, and I now have a reputation for being very non-judgmental and allowing people into space and having conversations with people, without judging them, which is really lovely. And I'm very proud of that. But I wasn't always thus.
Diane, that resonates for me as well. I mean, I know from my own studies within positive psychology that positive emotions open your perspective. So-called positive emotions. I mean, there aren't any positive, but the emotions that we like, they keep us open psychologically and even visually as well. So that makes total sense from my understanding of social science as well.
Yeah.
And what you said, Diane, chimed with me. The Tantra session that was proposed on the Monday at Camp Out, Leora, put that on the blackboard when we had our open space sessions. And it was a really amazing session because we grouped into threes, and one of those three was standing on a pedestal being appreciated by the other two. And we varied that triage around. So each person, and people were very unsure of themselves, they were in the spotlight, they were standing there, and we were having to admire that person and find the positives in them. And again, I come out of some of these events and I think things have changed for me. That was a real shift to be in that Tantra session and feel that. So we're going to start. Sorry?
That's powerful stuff. I mean, and if you do it with a whole group, so literally one person in the center of a group, which for many people is very uncomfortable to be sitting in that central space, but to everybody be focusing on their heart and sending vibes from their heart is just stunning. And it can be utterly transformational. Yeah.
Lots of ideas for next year's Camp Out coming through. So it's almost 10:02. We've got 10 minutes left. Ooh, time's flying. It's been a great session. Thank you. I'd like to start just wrapping up. So if anyone wants to say anything, Ken, do you want to start with a final flurry?
Flurry, yeah. Wow. What can I say? I think we've got to go at this topic again. Like I said before, I will admit that I do not read the conservative stuff. We can get bombarded with that in this country. I would find it very hard, if not impossible, to find anything positive to say about Donald Trump. But the one thing I will say is high school class reunion several years ago, 50th reunion, we were all in our late 60s. The reunion committee expressed very strongly that while we're at the reunion, we should not get into political discussions. I did do a little bit of that, and it was kind of a challenge because a lot of them are very conservative. The only thing I can tell you is that for a temporary 2-day period, like that episode of Star Trek where the whoever they were came in and kind of like stopped a conflict, we all behaved very well. There were no problems that I'm aware of. We had a great time, and something about that event transcended political persuasions, musical tastes. I'm an elitist. I don't know what it was about us that managed to do that, but I was in a situation with some very conservative people. They knew pretty much where I stood on the things. I knew where they stood. There were no fights. There was nothing physical. We all managed to get along, like in that episode of Star Trek where the outsider comes along and says, well, can you just stop the conflict for one day? And we did. We stopped it for 2 days. And 2 days from now, we're going to have our 3rd or 4th reunion Zoom gathering. And I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. And yeah, very pertinent and relevant. Andrew said in the chat window, Donald Trump didn't start any wars. That has to be a big positive, doesn't it?
I'm not sure that's accurate. Sorry.
Well, not
He
if you
certainly is a
look
fossil fuel addict, so I've got no use for it. Anyway.
but he did let the Kurds down, and he caused them a lot of grief. So he's not a saint.
He's about as far from a saint as it's possible. You don't really want to get me started on Trump. I hate him. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, hatred's an interesting one. Who would like to go next? Anybody like to wrap something up?
Yeah, I heard it. Oh, sorry, Evie, you just put your hand up and I just butted in. Just a couple of things, a couple of sources that
It's okay, you can go first. Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate that. A couple of sources that I don't know if you come across the Daily Skeptic. I find a pretty good source. Just, I mean, again, let me just bring it up here. I've got where's it gone? The strap line is question everything, stay sane and live free. And they bring a sort of conglomeration of lots of different articles that give an alternative perspective that you wouldn't hear on the BBC or you might not read The Guardian. So again, it helps to bring a bit of balance. And very oddly, I came across something called thelightpaper.co. which is kind of interesting. And I've read some interesting articles in that as well. But yeah, just as an alternative media source to perhaps your mainstreams. That's where I come from anyway.
Thank you. Can I propose we set up a thread on the Campfire site for alternative media sources, just for links, really? I'll set one up as soon as the meeting's finished, or maybe even now. Ebby?
Yeah, the Light's newspaper is really great because it's really good. Yeah, it's our freedom paper that we can distribute free. I think from my experience within the last 2 years, it's not about individuals. So sometimes we attack individuals. I personally feel like Maria said, and Diane has said, and Zelda, she's gone, has said, it's about our internalization, our internal being able to discern and stay neutral, because we are facing, well, extinction really. If we don't come together, because we are one, we're one consciousness, and we've got all these things to divide us. So we've got the race issue which divides us, the climate issue which is dividing us. There's a lot of untruths that we're told about that. We've got the sex issue which is dividing us. There's all these separations coming to keep us distracted from what's really happening, which the truth is our extinction. The extinction of human 1.0 into human 2.0, which is the AI version of what we are now. And that's the bottom line. And if we don't stop fighting each other and calling each other shells and saying this person's bad and that person's the good one, without sorting out our internal, because once we sort out our self-love and our internal, we'll be able to love even Bill Gates. You know, Bill Gates is here for a purpose. Without his evil, we can't progress. So without the evil, we can't, because we won't know what bad looks like. We won't know what good looks like, and we'll just stay where we are. We can't progress to whatever is coming next. And so I think it's important that we find out who we are. We try and stay neutral within the, I don't know, bad or good. Is that a word that we've just created to cause division? I don't know. Is there bad and good? Not really. In this, we live in a dichotomy where both have to exist. It's never going to be all good. They both have to exist for us to grow. And that's all I have to say, that we need to look internally and first try to understand, like Stephen Covey said, before trying to be understood.
Thank you. And yeah, another angle on the extinction thing you mentioned, another recommendation for Simon Elmer's book, which I've been talking about on the Campfire site, The Road to Fascism. AB has a copy in front of her, but it's a bit blurred. Ah, yeah, you can see it. Essential. I've got halfway through it, and it's the most important book I've read in recent times. Probably. One of them, anyway. Who would like to go next? Maria.
Just want to say, Abby, the zoomed out version, it's so hard to grasp, but thank you for sharing that. And I just want to bottom line something that I wrote that might not be accurate, but what's coming up through this conversation for me and that I'm taking away is that we can't look to others to be understood. We have to take care of being understood first by ourselves. And that's because, like, we all have this need for certainty. It's like a human need to feel certain. And we need to look to ourselves to find that certainty so that we have the capacity to be with other people. But I guess that's all. That's all. Just what I'm taking away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian, any words of wisdom from the Slough area?
Just like in general terms, it's just getting back to the theme of just what media you can trust. I tend to sort of, I think I'm generally, although I say to myself, I'm pretty good at spotting some really dodgy information. That's we can usually spot scams. The giveaways are just things like say copy and paste, don't share. That's a pretty bad giveaway. Yeah. Does anybody, can Snopes be trusted? That's the thing, probably one of the oldest fact-checking urban myth sites. Has anybody still got any opinions one way or the other about that, or what fact-checking dodgy urban myth sites can you trust? That'd be a question.
Can't be trusted.
So say again.
Cannot be trusted.
No.
Nothing.
All leads to the same Bill Gates and co.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're on the last couple of minutes, so maybe we can continue this next week. If I think it's some really important stuff coming up. Brian, was there anything else you wanted to? Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Zelda?
Yeah. First, I want to apologize again for turning up late and sort of falling in, sort of landing in the middle of it. And yeah, it's been really nice to connect with everybody. thank you so much for this, Pete, for setting up the whole thing. And thank you to everybody. It's great to meet you. And I hope to see you all again and continue this kind of exchange.
Thank you, and it's great to see you here. Yeah, I've always liked your posting on Facebook, so few gentle nudges to persuade you to do more on Campfire, which is lovely. Thank you. Who hasn't wrapped up? Dan, Chris, anything to say? I think everyone else has gone, haven't they?
Yeah, I was thinking, when I go walking down the town, I always go past the cinema, and it seems the cinema is full of films of people trying to save the world. Well, that's ridiculous. When we act as a mosaic, we all have the gifts. We are all community. Once we realize these things, we can start the changes that are needed. Now is the time, and it's getting important as the time goes on. So let your star shine and may it be seen with many others at this time of year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That's a lovely warm note to go out on. Diane?
Yeah, just would echo that. I mean, there's so many things come to mind. Let me just quickly get one in. Okay. Yeah, one of the things, we're all part of the universe. Universe is one song. And so it's for each of us to play our own part in that, whether we're playing a flute, a drum, humming a tune, or whatever it is. It's just getting out there and doing our thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd echo that. With bells on, Christmas bells, almost.
That's your instrument, obviously.
It was drums, but